Well, welcome to Way to Be TV, where there's a better way to be than atheist or theist. My name is Elise Elrod. It is February the 4th, 2016. We're going to continue our discussion of ancient Christianities, but this week we're going to compare Orthodox Christianity with Gnostic Christianity. It has a big range of ideas, and there's many different kinds of Gnosticism, many different ideas within Gnosticism. But basically, there is a supreme deity in Gnosticism, but there are also many lower divine beings as well. There was one of those divine beings named Sophia, which means wisdom, who had some incompetent offspring gods who created the earth, according to Gnosticism. But Gnostics believe that within a person might be a divine spark. And within Gnosticism, it requires secret knowledge that will get you back to that divine space. And so that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. Nag Hammadi libraries in Egypt, the books that were found, they were 13 large books. It's not actually a physical library, but it's a library of books, and a corpus of books, if you will. But that group of books was found in 1945, in the middle of the 20th century, and it included many Gnostic writings. One of the books found in that library was the Gospel of Thomas, but the original was probably in the first half. Most scholars believe it was written in the first half of the 2nd century. And so what I thought I would do today is I would read some of these, some of the sayings. The Gospel of Thomas is nothing in the world but 114 sayings of Jesus. And it opens, and we talked about the secret, the hidden sayings, the secrets, if you will, that you need to know to be able to make your way, the divine spark, to make its way back to heaven. These are the hidden sayings that the living Jesus spoke, and Judas Thomas, the twin, recorded. And he said, whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death. In that 114 sayings, I picked out a few to read to you that I think might be helpful. And I want to talk about them in relationship to the way. I was teaching this information in a church several years ago, and someone in the audience said, Elise, do you realize that, because I actually did an audio of the entire Gospel of Thomas, and they heard the whole thing, and they had someone in the audience had been reading the Gospel of Thomas at home, and they said, do you realize that much of what the Gospel of Thomas says Jesus had to say is very similar to the way that you teach? But the third saying says, Jesus said, if your leaders say to you, look, the kingdom is in heaven, then the birds of heaven will precede you. If they say to you, it is in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom of heaven is inside you, and it is outside you. When you know yourself, and remember the word gnosis for Gnostic means to know. When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, then you will dwell in poverty, and you are poverty. But the 7th saying says, Jesus said, fortunate is the lion that the human will eat, so that the lion becomes human. And foul is the human that the lion will eat, and the lion will become human. Now, if you can figure out what that means, you'll be the first, I think. Some of the people who have studied the Gospel of Thomas, they say, first of all, they do think the Gospel of Thomas was written in the first half of the 2nd century, but some of the sayings at the Gospel of Thomas are shorter and simpler and seem more primitive than those in our Gospels, in the Orthodox Gospels of the canon that we have today. So is this a saying that perhaps was more like Jesus said when Jesus was alive, or is it not? And so that's one of the questions in scholarship today about the Gospel of Thomas, that some of the sayings actually look like they might have preceded the sayings that we have in the Gospels in the Bible today. Saying number 11, and this is another one, Jesus said that this heaven will pass away and the one above it will pass away. Well, we just talked about the levels of the divine beings and the secrets that you have to know to unlock the gate to get back up through to the highest level of heaven. The saying number 48, Jesus said, if two make peace with each other in a single house, they will say to the mountain, move from here, and it will move. That's an interesting one to me, because I don't know if any of you all remember just exactly what the saying is that goes with that in the gospel, in our gospels, in the Christian gospel. But in the canon of the gospels, the saying of Jesus is, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, then you can say to a mountain, move, and it will move. Well, here he says, if two make peace with each other in a single house, they will say to the mountain, move from here, and it will move. So in the Orthodox Christian tradition, if you have faith enough, it's an interesting comparison. If you have faith enough, then you can say to the mountain, move, and it will move. Here it's saying, if two make peace with each other in a single house. In other words, if you have the will and the desire, if you will, and know how to make peace between each other and between other two people, that's where the power comes from. The power, if you will, comes from the ability to make peace, not from faith that existed, whether it be Gnostic Christianity or Orthodox Christianity or any other kind of Christianity, the different Christianities that existed. Then these Christianities would have done with Jesus' sayings what he wanted to. And that's the main point I'm trying to make tonight, is that the Gospel of Thomas uses the scuttlebutt and the other writings that were going around in one way, and the Gospels that we know as the Gospels within our Bible, use Jesus' sayings in another way. And who is right?
Colleen says these sayings are quite confusing.
They are.
And Jan says, why do you think the three deities reference was taken by the Christian religion to refer to the Trinity? And then Jan also says, so why do you think that the Gospel of Thomas was not included in the Bible? Instead, scholars called his writings, quote, Gnostic, unquote. My world sometimes feels like a circus.
The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the only text that relates to that it's agreed by fundamentalist scholars all the way to the most liberal scholars. In other words, everyone knows for a fact that the text that's in the Bible concerning the Trinity, the only place that exists, was added centuries later in order to add the Trinity to the Bible. And so, no, I don't think it was taken. I don't think the three deities are probably, since it's a Gnostic library that this was discovered in, my guess would be that the three deities were talking about the fact that there are more than one heaven and more than one deity. It's a polytheistic situation for the Gnostics. Not only is it polytheistic, but it seems to be polytheological.
Well, I think it kind of goes with Colleen's. Colleen said, I think it was not included in our Bible because it was statements of Jesus without stories to them. And then Jan says, and who created the stories?
We don't know. I mean, the Gospel of Thomas was written at a time, at best, in which Thomas would have been long since gone from this earth. Okay, but so it was. The Gospel of Thomas was not written by Thomas, just as the Gospel of Matthew was not written by Matthew, or the one by John, or the one by Mark, or the one by Luke. Or the Gospel of Philip was not written by Philip, and the Gospel of Peter was not written by Peter, and the Gospel of Mary was not written by Mary, and the Gospel of Judas, and so forth. Okay, so these are anonymous writers, huh?
Colleen answered it. She said the mystery writers.
Yeah, The saying number 97. Now, you listen to this. Colleen, you and Jan figure out the solution to this little riddle here. Tell me what Jesus was saying. Jesus said, the Father's kingdom is like a woman who was carrying a jar full of meal. While she was walking along a distant road, the handle of the jar broke, and the meal spilled out behind her along the road. She did not know it. She had noticed a problem. She had not noticed a problem. When she reached her house, she put the jar down and discovered that it was empty. End of saying. Now, tell me what that means. She was walking along. She broke her jar without noticing. All the meal spilled out, and she got home, and the jar was empty. And there's two more I'm going to read to you, and then I'm going to stop. Because what does it say in the Gospels? You won't be able to wait on it. You won't be able to say, here it is, or there it is, or whatever. But the kingdom of heaven is within your midst. And then finally, the last statement, the last saying in the Gospel of Thomas, number 114. Simon Peter said to them, Mary should leave us, for females are not worthy of life. Now, one of the legends of the Gnostics is that Mary Magdalene was one of the apostles. She was there with the apostles. She had a say and so forth. She had influence. And Simon Peter was jealous about it. So Simon Peter said to them, Mary should leave us, for females are not worthy of life. And Jesus said, look, I shall guide her to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit resembling you males. For every female who makes herself male will enter heaven's kingdom.
I think that explains why it's not included.
Why? Point I'm trying to make here, and the point I'm trying to make here is a rather simple point. I don't want to get too carried away about it because I'm no expert on the Gospel of Thomas. And there are thousands and thousands of things that have been written about this. This thing made a big splash when it was found in the middle of the 20th century, in 1945. And there has been so much stuff written about this. Is if this existed, and all these other things, we have so much information now. We've been talking about that for about a month, but we have so much information about it that my question comes down is, what if the ancient Gospels were laid side by side? Okay? The Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of Mark, the Gospel of Luke, the Gospel of John, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Judas, and whatever else there is out there. And we removed the supernatural from them. Would there be themes related to Jesus' teachings and sayings concerning life? And would there be a contiguous line of thought that seems to repeat itself in those writings? The supernatural that is laid in on top of the Gospels and laid in on top of all of the scripture that we have is there because that is nothing sinister about it. It's the way they communicated. Just like in the Gospel of Thomas, you've got some pretty squirrely things going on. That's the way they communicated. They invented stories. They invented sayings. They did all kinds of things. And obviously, if you are a person who has a great appreciation for science, as I do, I have a degree in engineering, not just in divinity, but if you believe that nothing supernatural has ever happened, is happening now, or ever will happen, then you know that Jesus' following could not have resulted from him doing supernatural acts in front of them. Instead, it had to come from his teachings and from his sayings and from what they learned from him and the kind of inspiration they got from him. And I think most Christians today would agree with that comment. Read the chats, Joni.
Trying to pick up where we left off. We were talking about the mystery writers who wrote them centuries later, and Jan said, my thoughts exactly. And then Colleen was responding to the lady whose jar broke and her meal was twisted.
Okay.
Be more attentive to your life.
Wait a minute.
more tuned in. Then Jan says it might mean that we may not know who we influence in this world, but we do lay breadcrumbs along the way, making a better life.
Okay.
I agree with that. For others, we lost so much of our oral histories as well. There were more oral histories than written. That's Colleen. And then Jan says myths, and more myths. And I was surprised to find that Buddhism and Gnosticism are closely related based on personal experience and filled with suffering. And Colleen says, agreed. In Buddhism, one must become humble and open to every hurt that may come to teach one to be humble on quote unquote the path. There's two more. With slurs, learn tolerance. With physical pain, learn to forgive. In hunger, to yearn for the quote unquote food of knowledge, and to learn to be at peace with yourself and others.
So I wonder if that's not the case. If what Jesus was saying may be very similar to that, is there is a way to live this life despite the circumstances that are in it, such that this life can be a good life. It's the one we
Well,
have. Yeah.
I think most of the religions I've ever heard of that are popular anyway, it's you learn to live with life while being of service to other people. That's certainly supposed to be true of Christians.
All right. So what do you think about all this, Joni? What do you think about the Gospel of Thomas? Did it set you back, or does it cause you to think that maybe they argued over all kinds of things?
Same way we
Obviously,
do.
obviously the Gnostics became the heretics. I mean, they became the ones that were not able to get their point across. But their beliefs are obviously considerably different. Even though they're both based on the sayings and teachings of Jesus, their beliefs are considerably different, aren't they, than Orthodox
Yes.
Christianity, right?
Some of them are. They're probably out on um, the left end of things. But you have to wonder if the circumstances around those beliefs, if they caused people to act in a way that was not acceptable to society then or whatever, for some reason they decided that this is not what we want. This is not what we want to encourage, so we're going to leave it out. And they're the line in the sand. It didn't make it past that line.
Right. So I guess that's the question I have, though. The question I had is, if you lay all those Gospels down side by side, and there's something in them, the ones that are not in our canons are not in our canons because I think the one piece of criteria that most affected what did wind up in our canons eventually by consensus, obviously we didn't have a vote or something, but they didn't make it into the canons because of the tide against them, because some theological thing that they were saying simply, and obviously the Gospel of Thomas would be obvious with that, did not fit the theology that they had decided they wanted to push. In other words, those that were making the most headway believed in certain theology. That theology was becoming more and more popular, and the Gospels that expressed something outside that theology or that revised that theology in some way simply lost its place at the table. There's a movie called Who Shot Liberty Valance, and it's got a great line in it. And the old senator is telling who made his career, he made his political career off being known as the one who shot the outlaw Liberty Valance, and he's telling the story to the newspaper editor, and it turns out he didn't shoot Liberty Valance at all, but somebody else shot him from across the street, and that in reality his whole life had been built on a lie. And he told this story and was completely honest about it. And the newspaper man, after taking all these notes, got up, walked over to the stove, and threw them in the stove and burned them up. And he said, "Are you not going to print the story?" He said, "This is the West, sir." He said, "When the legend outlives the truth, you print the legend." And so that's kind of the way I think maybe some of the stuff that we have today is. The legend has outlived the truth, and we may never know the truth again concerning exactly what Jesus had to say or why those people followed him. I believe he was a real person, and I believe the following was really there. So we'll send you the credits, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.